Florida Democrats have canceled the Democratic primary in their state and have declared Joe Biden the winner because of democracy. They say they say that's democracy. That's how it works. Here's what Washington Post had to say about it. It says, with presidential primaries looming, there's only one name on the official list of Democratic presidential candidates in Florida, President Biden, a move that angered the incumbent's long shot challengers who say they've been unfairly left out. The decision is the latest setback for Representative Dean Phillips, who's a Democrat from Minnesota running for president in the Democratic primary. Marianne Williamson is also running, and she's been running. And there's also Cenk Uygur from TYT, who is running as well. Says that both of those two, they didn't list Cenk, trail Biden in public polling and fundraising. Under Florida rules, the state party votes on who will appear on primary ballots. Florida's Democratic primary said in a statement on Friday that the executive committee voted unanimously late last month to name Biden and only Biden to its list of candidates. If a presidential primary has a single candidate, then state election law says that the uncontested race will not appear on the state's primary ballot. So they're saying, well, there was only one person. This was an uncontested race. We don't care about the three of you who are running for president. I mean, what would they have done if RFK Jr. was still running as a Democrat? They still would have canceled this and said there are no real challengers. This is an uncontested race, even though he's polling higher than Joe Biden in certain aspects of the election, and yet they would have still canceled it. So this is a bull excuse. They just didn't want to shame or embarrass Joe Biden by having many of his votes be lost to Marianne Williamson, to Cenk, who's there would be an issue with Cenk on whether or not he could even take office because he was not born in the United States. That still needs to be up to the courts. And also to Dean Phillips, who's also running for president. But the Democratic Party said, no, we're Democratic. And so we're going to cancel, we're all about democracy, so we're going to cancel democracy. Dean Phillips said Americans would expect the absence of democracy in Tehran, not Tallahassee. Our mission as Democrats is to defeat authoritarians, not become them, right? Michael T. Morley, who teaches election law at Florida State University College of Law, told the Washington Post that both political parties in the state have lined up behind incumbent presidents and canceled primaries in the absence of credible challengers. And he cited the re-election campaigns of Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Obama as examples of this process in action. Yeah, but were they incredibly unpopular? I mean, Joe Biden is incredibly unpopular. There's actual challengers to him. The people should deserve to have their say. And one thing that Cenk mentioned was that, if they could just arbitrarily give all the delegates of Florida to Joe Biden without an election, they could theoretically do that with anybody. And they, of course, could. So he says, well, why do I have any less of a claim to those votes than Joe Biden if we're not going to have a vote at all? And I think he's right on that. Here's the Democratic Party actually cheering. I want you guys to listen to this. This is when they announced to the world that they have just officially put Joe Biden on the ballot without an election, no election whatsoever in Florida. And they said, we just officially put President Joe Biden on the ballot in Florida 4 more years. And this is them cheering that on.
4 more years. 4 more years. 4 more years. 4 more years. 4 more years.
Yeah, so they're super excited about that, championing the fact that they didn't have any democracy at all in this state of Florida for Democrats. Marianne Williamson and Cenk Uygur did a joint press conference to push back on this, to say that this was a sham. And of course it is. I mean, Marianne Williamson has been running this whole time. Cenk is kind of new to the race. Dean Phillips also in the race. But Marianne's been running pretty much the entire time since there was, she announced quite early, quite a while ago. But here is a clip of Marianne explaining this whole, just kind of talking about what has happened here. Watch this.
The Constitution confers no special assignation to incumbency. This is just a narrative that was created by them, this idea that you don't challenge an incumbent. And that includes, by the way, Teddy Kennedy challenging Jimmy Carter. It's really important for us to remember, Ronald Reagan defeated Jimmy Carter, not Teddy Kennedy. So we have all of these memes that are out there that are being used to create the impression that Dean and Cenk and I are doing something wrong. We are not doing something wrong. We are running for office. That's not wrong in the United States of America.
Well, it's not supposed to be, but apparently you're not allowed to do it anymore, according to the Democratic Party, because democracy. Well, the Democratic Party has pushed back and they said, "Ah, you guys are overreacting. This is not a conspiracy theory. There's nothing to see here." This is from the Miami Herald. They're saying no conspiracy. Florida Democrats explain cancellation of state presidential primary. In this, they say the Democratic Party says the decision was made weeks ago and its hands are tied. They can't change it. The deadline for the party to submit its candidate list to the Florida Secretary of State's office was November 30th. Under the state law, if a political party lists only one presidential candidate, that person will be declared the automatic winner of the primary and no vote will be held. The party chose its roster of candidates at a meeting of its state's executive committee in October, a decision that went under the radar. Eden Giagnoro, the Florida Democratic Party's communications director, said that Biden was the only candidate nominated for the ballot and was consequently the only one whose name was submitted to the Secretary of State's office. They went on to say then reiterated that the party was just simply following the rules and said, I think what would be anti-democratic would be us bending the rules for latecomers. Yeah, latecomers. Marianne Williamson has been running this entire time. She's been running for as long as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was running. Sure, maybe Cenk is a latecomer, maybe Phillips is a latecomer, but Marianne's been there the whole time. There absolutely should have at least been a primary with Joe Biden's name and Marianne Williamson's name on the ballot and let voters decide if they want to vote for Marianne Williamson. And the thing that would have been embarrassing for Joe Biden is if there was a good chunk of people who chose her over him. And that is something that they don't want to have happen. They're looking to minimize or really what they're looking to do. I mean, look, this just kind of plays right on into what I've been saying this whole time, which is they're going to be swapping Joe Biden out. I think their goal was to swap him out with Gavin Newsom. And I think that's why we saw the debate between Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis, this kind of odd debate, because neither of them are likely to be the nominee for the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. But there was this odd, weird debate between the two governors anyway, like as if, well, this is what we wanted. The establishment saying this is what we wanted to have happen. We wanted these two guys to face each other, not Donald Trump and Joe Biden again. But I do think that the Democratic Party they were planning on swapping out Joe Biden for Gavin Newsom. The problem is Gavin Newsom performed so poorly in that debate, and many more people liked Ron DeSantis in that debate that, it's kind of a question on how strong Gavin Newsom or any Democrat. I mean, I can't think of a single Democrat who would do well against Donald Trump in a general election or against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But nonetheless, what I've been saying this whole time is that they're going to get to the convention. They're going to then say, well, Joe Biden's not running for president after all, or maybe they'll allow the convention to happen, but most likely not. Most likely they'll do this during the convention. And they'll say, so we don't know what to do. We want Gavin Newsom. Joe Biden's going to step down. He said he was only going to he was only going to serve one term, that he's just too old. So he's going to step aside. He's going to let a younger generation lead America. Isn't he great that he's going to do that? Oh, shoot, we don't have anybody else. We didn't have a primary, so there's nobody else that, was the runner-up. There was no close call. So here's Gavin Newsom. Now all the delegates vote for Gavin Newsom. And that would be it. That would be the Democratic Party primary process, and them just kind of swapping Joe Biden out for somebody else. And that's how they would get away with it, because they wouldn't, especially if they're not going to hold primaries. If they're not going to hold primaries and there's no one else who would have claim to the delegates because there was no primary, they're more likely to do this. So this is the first sign that they are planning on swapping Joe Biden out at the conference, at the DNC convention, because theoretically, if they were to have the primary in Florida, and let's say, Marianne Williamson gets second place to Joe Biden, and maybe she gets 10% of the vote or 4% or even 1% of the vote, she could still theoretically, if Joe Biden steps aside at the convention, she could then have claim to those delegates and say, well, I was the runner up. And if he's going to toss his delegates away, then you have to give them to me, right? She would have that claim. Well, not if they don't have a primary process. And they could say, well, Joe Biden was the only name on the ticket. So if he gives up his delegates, then what do we do? Well, we could give those delegates to anybody we want. That's the plan, guys. That is what they're planning on doing. The question now is, are they going to replace him with Gavin Newsom? I'm still willing to bet that's who they're still hoping for that. I think they were hoping that he was going to somehow defeat Ron DeSantis in a debate. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea at all to put him up there like that. He's been going around, went to China, met with Xi Jinping. So he's kind of doing all of these quasi-presidential things, getting these photo ops in, standing on a debate stage doing debate. And that way they could say, well, Gavin Newsom's already been kind of, the public's aware of him. He's been debating Republicans. He's been visiting foreign leaders. So he's the natural shoo-in for the replacement for Joe Biden. I'm telling you, this is what they're going to do. I don't see Gavin Newsom being successful in this. I don't see Americans latching on to Gavin Newsom, just like they hoped Kamala Harris when they put her into vice presidency, thinking Americans will grow to love her. Nobody grew to love her. It didn't work. So they're trying to get us to grow to love Gavin Newsom, or thinking that we'll rally around him. And there will be Democrats who rally around him because they would rally around anybody who's got the D next to their name. But I don't know. It's interesting, but this is just another one of those examples. This is one of those clues of what they're planning on doing in order to thwart democracy at the time of the convention and just put in the person they want without the voters' input at all. That is the Democratic Party now. I'm sure Republicans are looking with envy, wishing they could do the same thing. They actually do adhere to democracy, to democratic standards, and they do have elections. That's why they ended up with Donald Trump the first time, and will end up with Donald Trump again. I'm sure there's many in the GOP establishment who wish that they could do what the Democrats are going to do and have super delegates and cancel primaries and just put in the person that they want rather than the person they're going to get, which is for sure Donald Trump is going to be the nominee on the GOP side. So, but just, we're just going to keep looking for these clues that Democrats are going to continue to evade democracy and claim that they're the ones who are fighting for democracy and protecting democracy. In the meantime, they're the authoritarians out there. Go figure.